With the Missouri-Alabama line sitting at just 3.5, you might think that is disrespectful to the Crimson Tide, but I'm telling you it has a lot more to do with Missouri than it does Alabama.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball, here with you, a live edition here of Locked On Mizzou on a Wednesday evening, October 8th. And what a moment in time it truly is. You don't get these kind of Missouri games with this type of anticipation very often, do you? So to all of the people out there who are saying soak it in, soak it in. I definitely thought this all the way back in 2013, by the way, just taking it in when the Tigers won the SEC East Championship. I don't know if we're going to have that kind of moment on Saturday. Certainly not as much on the line in a singular game, but my goodness, when the Tigers are just 3.5-point underdogs at home, boy, I really like home underdogs, especially in the SEC, where the SEC so far, by the way, at last check, this according to Jimmy Stein, by the way, over at Locked On Bama, SEC teams a cumulative 46-7 at home so far this season. Of course, the Crimson Tide got a big road victory over Georgia. By the way, speaking of Jimmy Stein, well, Jimmy and Luke Robinson, I'm going to record a crossover with them. So a special, three-way dance, a triple threat match, if you will. So I think that's going to be a ton of fun. Going to run that one on Friday morning for you, and got a fun edition of The Squad tomorrow, where I do appear a few minutes in, just in time to talk Missouri and Alabama. So don't be alarmed out there, all you everydayers and squad listeners, if I'm not on immediately. I'll get there, I promise. I absolutely promise. And I also promise you this. I think all the respect that Missouri is getting right now is just that. I don't think it's disrespect towards Alabama whatsoever, though I do think there's an element to Alabama's part of this equation as well. But I really do want to focus on Missouri here. I mean, honestly, Missouri at 14th in the country, you can make an argument that they're still a little bit underrated. Listen, it's all gonna play out. If Missouri is as good as we all think, then the Tigers are going to end up in the top 10 to 15 somewhere, whether they win on Saturday or not. That's the good news, is for Missouri, this is not a must-win game, not even for the SEC championship, certainly not for the college football playoff, but as I've said a million times, this is kind of one of those measuring stick type of games for a program that, well, when they've had chances the last few seasons against LSU, against Georgia in winnable games, it just didn't quite get the job done. So if Missouri can get their first win ever against Alabama here, what an enormous deal that would be, of course. And I got to tell you, I think Eli Drinkwitz is feeling fairly confident right now. If I can read into his comments and, well, just his general demeanor here lately, and really, why shouldn't he be confident? If you're Missouri, not only do you have a really good team right now, you've got a really healthy team as well for the most part. Of course, the Blake Craig injury was terrible, and that could come back to haunt Missouri at some point this season. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully Missouri wins all of its games by enough that a place kick won't even matter. And, well, regardless of that, obviously Sam Horn, we're all bummed out for him as well. But especially on the defensive side of the football, there's been nary an injury so far for Missouri. And just really the Tigers have been able to play a lot of different bodies. This is the kind of depth defensively that you're used to seeing, well, during a lot of some of Alabama's best seasons. And you know what? Speaking of Alabama, speaking of their part of the equation here, I think this is a really, really good Alabama team. Make no mistake about it. I think that Florida State Week 1 loss down in Tallahassee was, well, had a lot to do with, yes, it's Week 1, folks. There's no preseason in college football, and I think the Tide have just looked like a much better outfit since then. I will say this, though. this is not the Alabama of the Nick Saban era, at least not the peak Saban era. For example, back when Missouri played Alabama to open up the COVID year of 2020 during that strange season, well, one thing that wasn't strange was Alabama was consistently excellent every single week. I have a buddy who listens to this podcast who happens to be an Alabama fan as well as a Missouri fan. He called that he was one of the people who called that team joyless murder ball. And that is indeed what it looked like when Alabama rolled into town that day. Not only is Missouri incredibly different, well, Alabama's never really, I don't know that any college football team in the near future here is going to match that level. We may look back and say, hey, this is one of the last teams of a different era, of a pre-NIL portal era before really, I think rosters in the SEC in particular started balancing out a little bit. Listen, I'm not saying Alabama and LSU and Georgia, for example, they're probably always going to have the advantage. They're probably always going to be among the winningest teams in college football and certainly in the conference. But I do think things are leveling out a little bit, and Missouri is a great example of that. Maybe we'll get into a little bit more of the rest of the league here as the show goes on. By the way, I mentioned Eli Drinkwitz maybe feeling himself a little bit. Well, Coach Drinkwitz actually bum rushed Kalen DeBoer's SEC teleconference. It seems like him and Kalen have a pretty good rapport there. He says, hey, Kalen, are you going to wear the black hoodie of death with us wearing black jerseys? To which Kalen laughed and said, yeah, more than likely. We'll see what the forecast is. So obviously Kalen took that as it was intended. But I just think, I don't know, for Eli Drinkwitz to just be jumping around and joking around like this, I'm not saying this means Missouri's going to win. I do think it means that Eli Drinkwitz is pretty confident. And I think that's something that, going back to this previous offseason, Drinkwitz saying this is the best and most talented roster he's had while at Missouri, I believe him. Drinkwitz, for all of his bluster at times, he doesn't mind making a show in the media, making a joke, obviously putting on a Darth Vader helmet, for example, when the time comes, that type of deal, whatever it might be. I do think when it comes to actually talking about his real roster and his team, I think Drinkwitz is pretty honest with us the most time. I really believe that. So I think he's confident. Does that mean Missouri is definitely going to win? Absolutely not. But I think he thinks, like I do, and I think a lot of you do, that Missouri has a real strong chance here. By the way, if Missouri is going to win this game, it wouldn't hurt to have a great atmosphere, of course. And, well, SEC Nation is coming to Columbia for the second time this season. They say, join us on Walsworth Plaza outside of Mizzou Arena at 2 p.m. this Friday for the Paul Feinbaum Show and receive free pizza, by the way, from Director of Athletics Laird Veach. So there you go. Obviously, everybody, welcome to that, I would assume. But if you're a student, hey, you can get some free pizza too. Nothing wrong with that. And you know what? I got a bunch of you already hitting me up in the comments here on this live edition of Locked On Mizzou. So I'm going to take those coming up here in just a little bit. First, though, I do need to do just a tiny little bit of business. So let's talk about Mazda, where they craft cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety picks plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breath work, well, athletes sweat all the details, by the way, and Mazda brings this same intention into how we craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. And because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. It is Mazda. Move and be moved. And also a Monarch Money. Yes, folks, I know, I get it. You got a lot of different accounts. You got a lot of different irons in the fire. Lord knows I can relate to that. And most people can't even name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's built for people with busy lives. And if you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch does it for you. And if you don't know anything about spreadsheets, again, this is perfect. This is exactly what you need. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONCollege. All right, let's take some of your live comments. Got a bunch of them already, and thank all of you for that, especially all of you everydayers who tune in. And by the way, whenever I go live, I've been tending to go live maybe once or twice a week or so here lately. Well, if you want to hear your question possibly answered live on air, click the little notifications bell on my YouTube page. That'll give you a notification on your device whenever the show is going live. And the Legacy BBQ says, "What's up?" Well, what's up, Legacy? And he also says, "Everyone betting against us." Well, I don't know about that. In fact, the sharps, I think the general public, is definitely going to side with Alabama. And I think actually that spread, I expect it to go back up a little bit, maybe closer to 4, 5, even 6.5 as the week goes along here. Again, we're only Wednesday. That's pretty early in the betting world. Most of the general public over at FanDuel, well, they tend to bet later in the week, whereas the sharps, the pro bettors, the people like me, quite honestly, who are pretty good at this, I was looking at this line when it was 6.5, even before the Alabama and Vanderbilt game. So I think the sharps have been all over Missouri. Clearly, they're the ones who are betting this line down right now. What I expect to happen, to Legacy BBQ's point there, I do think the public is going to jump on Alabama pretty soon when they see, the Crimson Tide at Missouri. Wait a second. Missouri never beats them. Let's take the Crimson Tide. And maybe those people will end up being right. I just think this time, really, this game is much closer to a pick'em than it even is Alabama by 3.5. I think if this were truly a Missouri sucker bet, I think you'd see a much higher line in Alabama's favor. That's just my analysis of the gamesmanship there by my buddies over at FanDuel. Did anyone see all of the CBS people had us losing by 40? Is that even true? All of them had us losing by 40? That seems hard to believe in a 3.5 point line. Legacy also says Marler thinks we are going to beat Alabama. And that really says something. I'll say that. Chris Marler, of course, of Locked On Gamecocks, Vern Funquist over on Twitter. Not only does he follow the Gamecocks, he covers LSU, and he happens to be an Alabama fan as well. So for Marler to say that Missouri is going to beat Bama, that really says a lot. I know he's a huge fan of Ty Simpson, thinks he's the best quarterback in the league so far. Marler does a frequent rankings of not only the best teams in the league, the best quarterbacks in the SEC as well. Well, he's got Purdue a third, so that's not exactly too shabby. And the way I'm looking at this, once again, for those of you who are not everydayers, the way I'm looking at this ball game, I think if Missouri can do what it does defensively and stop the run, I think if they can stop the Alabama run and jam Miller and make Ty Simpson and that really potent passing game, by the way, if they can just make them one-dimensional, I think Missouri's going to win. That's how I feel about this. And if they don't, well, I have a really hard time seeing Missouri win, quite honestly. For example, if Jam Miller rushes for 5 yards a carry or something, I think Missouri's probably screwed. On the other hand, 2.5, 3, I think a Missouri win is pretty likely. I know there's a lot more factors than that, of course, but that's just the biggest one I'm looking at right now. Gregory says Mizzou plays its best football when our backs are against the wall. Unlike last year, we're actually healthy for the most part. No doubt about that. That is a huge factor. And by the way, even guys like Brett Norfleet, I think he played every game last season, or at least most of them, but clearly he was banged up and hampered by that shoulder injury last season. Just looks like a different guy this year, and just a total difference maker for sure. Alabama worst top stat tackle percentage, and they are ranked 15th out of 16th in the league for 40-yard rushes given up. So I've seen that stat. I've seen Alabama's tackling, maybe not what you would expect. Now, Justin Jefferson, again, not the Minnesota Vikings Justin Jefferson, obviously, but no, the Alabama linebacker Justin Jefferson is one heck of a tackler, but they seem to rely on him much like, well, Missouri often relies on a free linebacker like Josiah Trotter to make a lot of plays against the run as well. So if he doesn't, well, there's something there. If you can get past Justin Jefferson, if you can get a block on him, maybe Ahmad Hardy, who is the best so far, I believe, statistically at breaking tackles and getting yards after contact. That's something really to watch. And by the way, fear, frankly, if you're an Alabama fan or defensive coordinator. Anonymous asks, is it true that Kirby Moore interviewed for Arkansas in its head coaching position? I believe that is true. I think that is true. I believe Gabe DeArmond had that. Somebody at least. If it wasn't Gabe DeArmond, I believe it was somebody with 24/7 Sports reported that at least Kirby has talked with Arkansas. And I think I would echo anybody out there who said that seems pretty unlikely. I think Arkansas, what they're looking for is an actual proven commodity as far as a head coach goes. Their AD said, hey, I want a proven winner. That's what I'm actually looking for, is a proven winner out there at a head coach. Well, obviously that's not Kirby Moore. I think he's a proven, really good offensive coordinator. Maybe he'll be an excellent head coach. I'm not saying he won't be. I'm just saying the word proven there is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And by the way, speaking of heavy lifting, ladies and gentlemen, Caden Proctor, not just a gigantic offensive lineman, but an actual real weapon offensively. So I want to talk about him and, you know what, take some more of your live questions here on this live edition of Locked On Mizzou. But first, you know what, let's talk about Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. And you know what? The great thing about Prize Picks, when you're right, you actually get paid. You don't just get to say, na, 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 boo, boo. No, you get some money in your bank account. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. And you know what? It's really simple. You just pick more or less on player projections. Like, for example, Josh Allen's passing yards, Saquon Barkley's rushing yards. And here's my favorite one, because a lot of times I don't necessarily have opinions on multiple players, but I do have strong opinions on one player. Well, let's stack them up. Do that one player, like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, whoever it might be, you can select their passing yards, their rushing yards, their touchdowns, all in one lineup. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. It is Prize Picks, where it is good to be right. So there seems to be some disagreement here on the comments I should say, about whether Kirby actually interviewed with Arkansas or not. Listen, I'm again, live show here. I'm just telling you what I believe I read here. I'm pretty sure I'm correct that happened. It seems like that was reported by 24/7. Maybe it was Gabe. Again, apologies for not remembering exactly who that was. Again, I'm spitballing here with live questions. So again, apologies there. Anyway, Steven says, black hoodie, it's over, LOL, must be an Alabama fan or just a sarcastic Missouri fan. Either way, hi, I appreciate you either way. If you're a Bama fan checking this out, Glad to have you, by the way. Nice to see you. Hopefully you have a good time in Columbia if you're coming down. And a bunch of people are saying he did interview for the Arkansas job. Mizzou Shang, he did it on this past Sunday. Yes, I'm sure I listened to Locked On Razorbacks and a few others. They really wanted Bobby. Yeah, John Neighbors really is a Bobby Petrino fan, and I don't blame him. He's more exciting than Sam Pittman, but my goodness, can you believe this? The circumstances of which Bobby Petrino, after crashing a motorcycle along with a volleyball player at Arkansas that he was having an affair with, somehow he's now back coaching as the head coach at Arkansas. Absolutely unfreaking believable. Ooh, finally somebody wants to disagree with me. Some John on John violence here. John Worley says, "Get real, John. We'll lose. They'll knock us out of the top 25. Won't matter if we win the rest of the year. Bama might give us respect. Nobody in the SEC never will." Well, man, if we get knocked out of the top 25, that really would be a pretty colossal beatdown. I just don't see that happening. I just think Missouri is too good for that. I know Missouri has not played a strong schedule so far, and it's fair to question it. Of course, it's fair to question the results so far. But I think at a certain point, when you're just dominating your opposition in the run game on both sides of the ball, and by the way, you got a pretty good passing attack too. I know the pass defense over the top at times has left a little bit to be desired, but I'm just telling you, I think that's fixable. And since I brought up Gabe, I actually totally agreed with what he said in his mailbag today. He said he thought the biggest issue is that the safeties have basically been too aggressive. I completely echo that. And basically he's saying, hey, you got to be the last man back if you're a safety, especially when you've got this type of run defense. If you're an everyday listener of Locked On Mizzou, you've heard me basically say this on several occasions. Heck, maybe Gabe is an everyday or two. But no, seriously, I could not agree with a take more. I think he's 100% on the right track with that thought, in my opinion. And by the way, since I teased the big man thing, by the way, an actual big man play that works. And I say this because I just remember back when Barry Odom would try to slam Josh Augusta into the line. To me, it just seems like a lot of times you give these 300-plus pound guys handoffs as a fullback or something. It just looks a lot better on paper than it ends up working in reality. It just seems to me that you're usually just better off giving the ball, I don't know, to your actual running back. Like, certainly I'd rather have Ahmad Hardy getting the ball than Caden Proctor. But I will say this. I did see them hand it to Caden Proctor for an effective play, a first down, a touchdown, all that good stuff against Vanderbilt. So if he lines up in the backfield, if you're Missouri, obviously be aware of him. And not only in the backfield, if he splits out wide, they'll actually throw him the freaking football too, as they did against Georgia on the world's largest, I don't know, you can't call it a bubble screen technically. I'm trying to think, I don't know, is it a hot air balloon screen when Caden Proctor is that size? I don't know. Tell me what your stupid jokes are, because mine didn't quite land. So anyway, let's see. What else do we have here? Any other questions here to close out the program? Some people are still worried about the secondary. Hey, I am too. Missouri's got, at this point, they need to prove it. The secondary needs to prove that they're not going to have miscommunications and they're not going to get sucked in, that last man back on a run play, when they should be more worried about, well, the passing play coming over the top. That's totally fair to be worried about that. I really liked what I saw Vandy do against Bama. Seemed like they kind of struggled with the running game. Well, I'll just say this. I think Bama was the better team ultimately. They had more depth against Vanderbilt. I think that won out in the fourth quarter. But it wasn't as though Alabama just utterly and completely dominated that Vanderbilt team in a game that was a revenge game at home. You would have thought Bama teams have passed. Again, some of the joyless murder ball team of 2020 would have probably beaten that particular Vanderbilt team by 35 points. They really would have. So again, this is a really, really good top 10 quality, maybe even top 5 type of Alabama team. The thing is, and this is once again to put maybe a bow on this and go back to what I started talking about, the thing that people need to realize is that Missouri so far is performing like a top 10 type of team too. And they have everyone practically healthy outside of the place kicker. This is a tough place to play, a team that knows exactly what it is, I think, by the way, early in the season, a team that's going to run the football, a team that's going to take deep shots when it needs to, a quarterback that's athletic and can run around and buy time and scramble for a 3rd and 5 when he needs to, and just a nasty, nasty pass rush, front 7, run defense that, occasionally we get a little too aggressive and give up something big over the top. But again, I think if Ty Simpson throws for 300, I think Missouri can still win as long as they bottle up that Alabama rushing attack, because eventually you're going to face a 3rd and 10, a 3rd and 15, and even Ty Simpson, as good as he's been, he's not going to pick up all of those. So I like the matchup for Missouri. I don't want to sound overly confident because, again, I think really this is a coin flip. These are two really, really good teams that I think are good for different reasons. So I'm excited. Cannot wait. I know you guys can't wait either. Thanks for all of you, especially all you everydayers out there, and especially to all of you who, helped me get this show off the ground, to be honest, with a lot of free content, a lot of great questions. Thanks to all of you as always. I am John Miller, and thanks as always for listening and watching to Locked On Mizzou.